when I was actually having to pay to maintain a property here, I was like, yeah, these numbers don't actually work. So this is not what I want to do. So yeah, the initial idea was to buy here. And then after a couple of friends of mine that are here, that are in Spain, they were like, well, why don't you just buy in the United States? Because you're American. And I was like, well, have you not seen the Atlantic Ocean? Like, that's kind of a big deal.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yona Weiss, and we are on a pleasant journey across the Atlantic or Mediterranean, depending on which way you want to go, with our special guest today, Billy Keels, hailing all the way from Barcelona, España. ¿Cómo estás?
Pues muy bien, hombre. And what they normally like to say is Barcelona.
Oh, yeah. I'm so not. The Spanish that I have is from California, so it's like Mexican Spanish.
It's all good. It's all good. We're showing the love.
We did remember the different past particles and all those different things that different in Spain. Yeah. But anyways, Billy is a really awesome guy, and I'd love to just give you a little bit of background on him, context before we get into this conversation. He's someone that has been working in corporate America for decades and actually loves what he does, which I love, the fact that you love what you do. And specifically, most recently working for a big software company called SAP. Is that how they call it? SAP?
Yeah, SAP.
SAP, yeah. One of the biggest software companies in the world, I believe, billions and billions and billions of revenue. And he is the host of the Going Long podcast, which is an awesome podcast speaking specifically about foreign investing in the United States. So think about people who are living outside of the United States, investing in the United States, like Billy himself. And he is the founder of the KeePon Cashflow, which is really just, it's a platform that you've created on your own because it's something you wanted to do, which was, living overseas, but investing. You're originally from the States, right? And investing in the United States and kind of bringing others along with you on that journey and teaching them about how to go about doing it. So I love that. I hope that's a sufficient little bit of background about who Billy is, what he's doing, and how you doing today.
Man, Yona, I am very, every time I talk to you and see you, like, I just smile, like, I'm just excited. So when you were a guest on the Going Long podcast with me, it was like the whole thing. And I loved your background. It was like super cool. And you were right in the center of town in Barcelona. And no, I'm looking forward to another conversation, a great conversation with you, because they're always fantastic, man. So yeah, gonna keep sharing.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I just want to kind of jump back to that first point over there that I made, that you are a corporate, I wouldn't say corporate America, because you're
corporate citizen.
So citizen of the world. And you've lived in Europe, for the better part of 20 years already. Is that right?
That's absolutely spot on. So I've been in Europe. It was supposed to be a 1-year sabbatical back in 2001. And so this year will be 20 years. Lived in 3 different countries between France, Italy, and Spain. Got married. I had 2 kids. Well, I didn't actually have the kids. My wife had the kids, but father to 2 children. And I love it, man. I really, really love it. Right. And I know it's one of the things that you can relate to, having been born on the other side of the pond and deciding that we really want to live on this side of the pond. And it's just, I feel very, very blessed, very fortunate to be able to do that. So yeah, it's been an awesome ride.
And, working with, global corporations that allow you to do that because, offices all over the world, really, right?
Yes. And so I guess that's one of the things, like, and it's funny you said I enjoy what I do in my corporate role, right? And so I've been very, very fortunate in that regard, and I've had a chance to work across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've worked on a global scale, and most recently have worked for the Spanish market. And so it's really interesting when you start to work in these really large multinationals, because you can kind of see the 3 different layers of an organization, and it's a matrix kind of an organization as well. So it gives you perspective, especially someone like me. Like, I'm super curious. So I always want to understand, like, why do they do certain things? And you're like, okay, well, if you've worked at the global level, you understand why they do this at the regional level. And if you've worked at the regional level, you understand why they do this at the local level, and kind of those things. And a lot of those skills I am also using as I continue to build my own business, right? The syndication side of things. And it's just like a win-win because you're solving really large problems for really large multinational companies.
Right.
And then I get a chance to do, very similar to what you're doing is live really where I want to live
Mm-hmm.
and invest where it completely makes sense for me. And my investors get a chance to do the same thing. So it makes it kind of nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to ask you a little bit about that. I mean, you lived in Spain for a long time, and have you ever considered investing locally in the Spanish market?
Interesting that you should ask that. So after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it took me a while to read the book, right? I picked it up and was all excited, and then I went back to it a couple years later. And so actually, my idea was when I read the book, I was like looking all over the place. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm going to buy a property here. And so I didn't know at the time that there were different markets, but that there are appreciation based markets, there are cash flow based markets. And I didn't have any sophistication about understanding it because I also don't come from a family that ever was involved in real estate or anything like that. And so when I started realizing that the book that was saying I could get like 100, $200 a door, when I was actually having to pay to maintain a property here,
Right.
I was like, yeah, these numbers don't actually work. So
Right.
this is not what I want to do. So yeah, the initial idea was to buy here. And then after a couple of friends of mine that are here that are in Spain, they were like, well, why don't you just buy in the United States? Because you're American. And I was like, well, have you not seen the Atlantic Ocean? Like that's kind of a big deal. But anyway, yes, but to answer your question, my idea initially was to purchase here locally, to buy something in my backyard. And one of the things we talk about now on the Going Long podcast, as you alluded to earlier, is like I want people to feel very comfortable and confident knowing that you don't have to invest in your backyard. Like you
Mhm.
can literally invest wherever you want in the world.
Right.
Technology makes it awesome for us
Absolutely.
to be able to do that. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you can walk properties, you can, visit FaceTime with,
Yep.
property managers or lenders or, you name it, even tenants, if need
Yep.
be. And I think it's important that something that you said there about, invest where it makes sense, not necessarily locally. And obviously there is a huge benefit to having, to investing locally, especially if you understand the local market. But if you live in a market where it does not make sense to invest, and there are plenty of markets like that in America also. Like I
Mm,
know a lot of people who live in New York. A lot of good friends of mine live in New York, and they would never, or at least now at this point, do not, by choice, invest in New York. And friends also, and family that live in California, and
mm,
it's just not feasible. Even my parents live in Los Angeles, and they invest out of state. They actually own a number of single family rentals in Las Vegas
mm.
market, which is a great market, has appreciated tremendously since they invested there. So that was a good play for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's so important. So I can relate to that a lot as well, because here in Israel, where I live, it is very difficult to find cash flow as an investment. There may be appreciation for sure, but and that all depends on your investment criteria
Yep.
and what you're looking for. But what else besides multifamily? Because I know you alluded to this a little bit when we were speaking earlier, but you're investing besides for multifamily, which is a typical, we talk about syndications, and everyone's in multifamily syndications, and there's also self-storage out there. Mobile home parks are becoming very popular.
Yep.
What else are you focused on? What are you looking into?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a couple different things. Just really quickly before I answer that, I love that you were talking about your own individual criteria, right? Because in the same way that people that are probably more focused on cash flow, there are
Mhm.
some people that live in New York or live in Barcelona where they love they're just consistently they're playing the long game and they're
Yeah.
like, we're gonna buy now. And then we're just going to hold on to it because what they really want to do is actually, build up the appreciation and have an appreciation play. They do the kind of the capital gains kind of thing,
Mhm.
and they'd rather play that game. And to your point, it's the same for me. Like I think any market or any location can be great for the person as long as they're clear on what it is that they want to actually get
Right.
out of their investment. So I love that you mentioned that as well. So, and this, yeah, one of the things we were talking about before. I mean, I've invested in smaller mobile or smaller multifamily. I own a
Mhm.
mobile home park, or my company does, and have invested in large multifamily. And there are kind of two things that I've invested in that are a little bit interesting. One is ATM machines, but the one that is really I keep having an issue. Like there was an issue that I continue to have because as my company goes out and we purchase more and more property, especially if you're like, I'm not a real estate professional.
Right.
So I have a day job. I like my day job. I'm well compensated for my day job. And I love investing in real assets, like in real estate is where it started. And so invest in these properties. And the thing that would happen is like year after year after year after year is I have this column, which is passive losses. And the passive losses, like they just keep building up over and over and over and over and over. And I was kind of like, well, yeah, but it would be great if I could do something to actually like get great returns. And then at the same time, like I keep going into my day job, but is there a way that I can actually figure out how I can also lower my adjusted gross income?
Right. Get some
And
of those
so
tax deductions. Yeah, for sure.
exactly right. Well, but also too, like if you're a tax professional or a real estate professional, excuse me, then it kind of makes sense. You know, like you always say, like we're just sharing my story, not giving anybody any advice or any of that kind of stuff, but just the reality. I kept looking at these passive losses build up, and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be forever. And so I ended up investing in large pieces of energy equipment. And which kind of probably seems a little bit strange. Like, why would you invest in energy equipment? But most of these large organizations there's a big push in the energy space to become carbon neutral by 2050, and then even some companies want to do it earlier and earlier and earlier. And there was an opportunity to really be involved in this type of a project that says, hey, listen, if you go out and you purchase a tangible asset, instead of it being an apartment building, it is a piece of equipment, a large piece of equipment. You invest in that, and then that piece of equipment does a couple of things that then would allow someone who's a high wage earner, someone who is like has money in IRA, 401k, this kind of stuff, to to be able to participate in basically in an activity, and that activity will then allow us to do two things. Number one, continue to get returns, and at the same time it allows us to be able to take some of those losses against our active income, or as taken against active income. So for me, as a non-real estate professional who really enjoys doing things that are quote unquote alternative, like, this was great because it was the best of both worlds. You can get the returns and also have the possibility to have it affect adjusted gross income.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. And so these are you're talking about energy equipment that you or your fund or your company, your group together is purchasing and then leasing them out to others, companies or who knows, to use them.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. And were you able to get them financed, or was it just a full cash play? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, full cash play.
Gotcha. Okay.
But that is one of the things I actually thought about, like, because I was talking to a good friend of mine who works in the finance, like in the banking sector, financial services, and he was like, "Well, have you ever thought about adding leverage to that?" And I was like, "Actually, that's a really good idea, but no." Yeah. But so far, it's been just raising the capital for this equipment, and then but that's definitely something that's on our roadmap to look at in the future.
Awesome. So tell me about the Going Long podcast. Let's just dig a little deep over there because I love it. I love the concept. There are tons and tons of people out there in the world who, whether they're U.S. citizens or not, that live abroad and see the incredible returns, the incredible growth of U.S. real estate market specifically. And you're kind of giving a roadmap, right? For those people by interviewing people who can kind of give a piece of the puzzle to make it happen, to make it a reality. Now, where did that concept, obviously I know where it came from because it came from you kind of doing that, but where do you see that going? Like what's the direction that's going in?
Yeah, you know what? And so, and I love that because it goes back to the same thing. Like I was having a particular challenge, right? Like I was living here in Spain, like that was my quote unquote challenge.
Right.
And I was trying to figure out, like, when I first bought property, I just bought property because I had the money to pay for it. I actually get the mortgage. And so I bought it. Like that was the very first. I bought my very first duplex. I was here in Spain, and then I had the money. I bought it, and then everything was great until, the money kept coming in, and I watched my bank account go up and up and up, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." And then things started happening, and this wasn't functioning. And because, of course, I didn't have a property management company because I wanted to manage that myself, right? Because that was the thing to do. And so I was figuring out, okay, this is going to be a little bit difficult. So I had to get a telephony kind of system so that people could call and we get messages and all that stuff. But then there kept being more and more things that were happening on a day-to-day basis. And so then I had to figure out, oh my gosh, well, I got to figure out who can actually help me do this. So then got someone to go over working as a handyman and was fixing things.
Yeah.
And then I started realizing, oh my gosh, well, I'm actually in a location that is not necessarily focused on the cash flow that I was looking for. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't actually really even think about anything. I just had the money.
You didn't write your research.
Exactly. Right. And so what I realized was, as I've gone through this process, and I was explaining to all my friends and the things that were happening. So I started realizing that I did it completely the wrong way. Like I wasn't clear on what it was the benefits that I was trying to derive from real estate. I then didn't actually think about what specific location, just to your point from earlier, like, because I had the money and
Right.
could get the loan, I just went to where I had family. And that was not the best place for me for what I was trying to get out of real estate. And then from there, really looking at how is the team understand the specific location. And then once, you have your personal philosophy, you're in the location and you have the right team, then it doesn't matter if you purchase a 252 unit apartment complex or you buy a multifamily or a smaller multifamily, as long as all the other pieces are aligned. And so what we like to
Mm,
do in the Going Long podcast is really help people to understand long distance, right? And initially it really was, and because you asked the question, like, where's it going? So originally it was about helping people to understand more about the US market. And so it is
mhm.
really focused on understanding about US based real assets. At the same time, someone like your parents who live in Los Angeles and they want to invest in Nevada or they want to invest in Ohio, where I'm
Right.
from, because they like cash flow, this gives them the tools to be able to invest wherever they want to invest and live wherever they want to live. They can live in Israel, invest in
Right.
Barcelona, investing in wherever. So it really started out being very U.S. centric, and it still is U.S. centric because that's the location that I want everybody to understand, because that's where I personally invest today.
Mm,
But the lessons that we learn there can be applied to no matter where you are. This is really
right.
that independence in terms of location where you are, and making sure that you're able to keep, what I always like to say is, keep your currency on the treadmill and running and growing and getting stronger.
That's absolutely, yeah. I mean, you want to make sure that your money is working for you, and working in a great job, a great corporate job, making
Mm,
money, and building a 401k or whatever it is, something like the
yeah,
retirement plan. But you got to make sure that your money's working
yeah,
for you. It's not enough just to make that money,
yeah.
right? You're working for money. You got to make that money work for you, and I love that. What would you say? Someone who has a background like you, maybe advice to someone maybe listening to this who also has a day job and they keep hearing all this great stuff about real estate and they're like, well, I actually really like my job. How do you balance starting your own investment company while still full time and obviously a family man and maybe some hobbies, who
Yeah.
knows? But what advice do you give someone who wants to like try to balance that? They don't really want to quit their job at this point, but they do want to get started
I would say
investing.
try and figure out how you can speak with Yona as quickly as possible and get some of his wise advice. That's exactly what I was telling him, because
Well,
because
that they're
exactly.
here.
There is it's a matter of being able to figure out what you're focusing on. Like you are where, I heard this the other day, you are where your feet are, right? And being focused on what it is you're doing at the time, because it's not one of those things that's easy. Like, I'm not going to pretend and say, hey, yeah, you can work your day job and it'll be perfect. You could be a perfect mom or dad, and at the same time you can build this company. And you know what? You can do that, all of that, in 4 hours a day. Like, it's not realistic. So I would say first is really to ask yourself why you want to be able to potentially build your own business or look at investing in other things. Like, you mentioned the 401k or the IRA. Like, one of the things that I've decided to do is I don't even invest that anymore, because I've figured out, or I'm on that path to really understanding how the money game works. And so one of the decisions that I made was not to place capital there any longer, because I believe that, that I can understand and control the capital better, and I can keep it on the treadmill running faster under my control, or the control of my teams,
Mhm.
in a much better way than it can be managed for me, right? In one of those qualified type of accounts, specifically
For
talking
sure.
about the US, but it's even here, even all over the world, right? So I would say ask yourself, the very first thing is, why do you want real estate to be a part of your portfolio, or why
Mm,
do you want to build that business? And if that why is strong enough, then I think you're going to push through those moments, because I know that I really specifically will continue to build the business, because I want to be able to share, living between two worlds with my children, and be able to do that when it makes the most sense for us, for my family,
mhm,
and things like that. And so the moments where I've been working 15, 16, 17, 18 hours, because I start early in the morning and I'm focused on myself and
mm,
making sure that I start the day out right, and really spend the first hour by myself. And then I go into things that are for my business. And then I get into the point where it's time to focus on the day job. And during that time, it's complete focus. And then in the evenings, I get some time with the kids. And then it's back to building the business. And then I get some sleep and I start it all over again. So, but I think, just to keep it not complicated, but to keep it simple, is to be super clear on why you're doing it. And
yeah.
then once you do that, then everything else becomes a little easier.
For sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have to set up a business of some kind, though, right? I mean, it's not enough, like you said. just having some money and then just, oh, well, let me just place it somewhere. I mean, that's okay. It may do well for a short period of time, but if you want to expand that and you want to, think long term and how to actually grow that and how to, have that money perform the best, I think it's smart to kind of set up, whether it's an entity, set up a company. And I think you talk about a lot of these things on your podcast, experts of all kinds, right, coming on your show, talk about, how to actually do this. And I don't know, for me, it's something that I'm also dealing with, right? Because I've just been in this real estate game for a few years myself, and investing now in the States, and it's becoming a little more complicated. It's becoming a little more difficult, and I've been struggling with how to do it right. How to set it up right. Should I just put money here? Should I just invest in this, and etc. So for me, that's why my curiosity is asking. You've been ahead of a few years longer than I have.
Yeah, well, you know what? One of the things that happens, is, or at least what I've found is, as things become more complicated, this is really where teamwork
Mhm.
really comes into it. Like, and I always say, hashtag teamwork makes the dream work, because it's true. As long as you're buying like just one property or two properties, or you're just kind of doing this for yourself, then it's not really that big of a deal. But
Right.
as soon as you start to begin to, you want to build a business,
Mhm.
you want to actually serve your clients to the highest of your capability, you start then doing that, not just cross state, but you start doing it cross border, cross country, cross continent. Then yeah, I mean, every single step and change, then the level of responsibility increases. And so that's when it becomes more important to make sure that, and I'll just use my example, that the tax team and the legal team in Spain are speaking to the tax and the legal team in the United States.
Mhm.
And then the team in the United States, they help you to understand if you're going to do certain type of a raise, and you're going to do a 506c, or for accredited investors, and you have to know what are the laws in Nevada versus Ohio versus Tennessee. Like especially whether or not you're working a day job, even
Mhm.
if you're the business owner, you still need a really strong team of people to
Right.
help you. And then you have to be very clear with them, like, what is it that you're trying to achieve for your business, for your investors, and for yourself, so that they can give you the best advice possible, so that you can make the best possible decision for yourself. But there are moments when, yeah, it definitely gets like, I remember there are times when I'm thinking, how much is this costing me? That's what I used to think, right? Now I start thinking, oh my gosh, how much would it cost me in the long term if I didn't set this call up?
Mhm. Right.
Like it, and so over the 7-year period, like, my mindset has completely changed.
Yeah.
Everything from what used to be a cost, it was a cost. Now I'm like, if I don't get these people on the phone together, then it's going to cost me
Gonna be a
or
liability
potentially
for
my
sure. Yeah.
investors, and that's something that I definitely don't want. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Part of the
That's
evolution, I think.
it for sure is. For sure part of the evolution. And like you said at the beginning, it's about learning. It's about that education and just continuing finding, building that team, finding the right way to go about doing things. And that's, growth and maturity. I mean, it really it comes with time, like anything. So, for a lot of people, we're like babies in the real estate game for a little while. And as you build those teams and as you get those mentors and people in place, I think that's the maturity that comes along with that. So that's pretty awesome. I love that. Billy, I want to, time flies and it's hard to imagine that, but I want to transition right now into the final four,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
are
man.
4 questions I ask all of my guests, which are, the first question is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
Um, well, if I say the worst job, I'll say it's like the worst slash most interesting job, because I worked in high school. I worked at a nursing home, and some would say that. Well, why would you say that? Well, it was because I didn't really know what I was getting into. I worked there because a couple buddies of mine were working there, and a couple of my friends were working at the same place, and so we would go in, and then I guess when at the time, like now I kind of look back on it, it was a great learning experience, because I got exposed to people that I on a daily basis that I normally wouldn't have. But my role was actually to clean all of the trays and the dishes after. So we would prepare the meals, the evening meals, and then we'd send them out, and then we had about a 30-minute break while everyone was eating, and then we would get all of the trays when they would come back in. And you can imagine the just kind of the ways that the trays looked when they came back in every night. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That was probably the most challenging job I've ever had.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're faced with things you may not want to have to put up with again. But yeah, that sounds like that could have been really interesting. Second question for you: what is a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift? And I see a lot of books on your back shelf over there, but maybe have one that's coming to mind.
Without a doubt, the one book that has completely just shifted my whole paradigm, there's a book written by a guy named G. Edward Griffin. And that book is called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And so the funny part is, when I heard it, I was like, "Oh, Jekyll Island, like Jekyll and Hyde, is that
Right.
kind of like the whole thing?" And so, and it's like a book. It's super thick, like it's a really thick book. I don't know if you've ever read it or not,
No.
but so the reason that it shifted my paradigm is because I didn't grow up around people that really talked. We didn't even talk about money in my family. Like, it's just one of those taboo subjects, right? We never had enough of it, so therefore we didn't talk about it. But once I started getting into the real estate world, at least it started in real estate. Now it's just tangible assets. Someone recommended that book, and when I saw the size of it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, never going to read that." It was like 600 pages or something like that, and without a doubt, just great shift, because what it does is it talks about the creature from Jekyll Island, which was the creation of the Federal Reserve in the United States, which
Hmm.
is on an island just off the coast of Georgia. And it talks about the role of currency, what was happening in the world, what the importance of debt and debt's role in the entire world. It talks about a lot of different world events that shaped us. And it just, after I read that book, it really helped me understand the importance of currency, and
Hmm.
more importantly, the importance of debt. And especially for those of us that are in the real asset world, in the tangible space, because it's just amazing when you start thinking, well, you can actually, you want inflation to happen if you understand how debt works, right? And you can use that to your advantage in a positive way. And so, yeah, without a doubt, that just, it completely
Wow.
shifted my mind. It was just boom, eye opener.
Okay. Wow. So that's a new one. That's definitely a new one for our reading list. We'll put that down in the show notes there. The
Yeah,
Creature from Jekyll Island. It's sounds really fascinating. It certainly
yeah,
does. I mean, any book that's talking about money and history and really getting into that, I think,
yeah.
be enjoyable. I mean, for
Yeah.
anyone that's into that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and the thing
Check
is,
it out.
I wasn't really even into it, and then I started reading it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, oh my gosh, is this real? Is this not real? And because I'm a relatively slow reader, like I purchased the book and then I bought the Audible, so I would actually be able to get through the entire book. But then I just found myself going through it, and it's one of those books that I actually go back and I reread every year, because it just, it's so relevant. It's completely relevant.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So third question for you is an interesting one. It's what is a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
Yeah, the biggest skill that I would really like to, I guess, more than learn, is to really master, is just the the skill to it's going to probably sound kind of crazy, but literally just to be able to sit still, like, because it's a challenge for me to sit still, because I really do enjoy interactions, and it's one of those things that I work a lot on, just that sitting down, sitting still, concentrating, getting things done, which is probably going to be a challenge for me my whole life, because one of the things that I love doing is interacting with people, and that's kind of in my desire zone, or like Michael Hyatt talks about the desire zone, like that is the place that I like to be. At the same time, I recognize that it is really, really important to have that skill, just to
Mm,
be able to sit down, zone out, and be able to do that for long periods of time. And it's
right.
something that I consistently work on. I guess more than what I want to learn, it's something that I literally want to improve on. And it's something that's in the forefront of my mind, that I struggle with that. I struggle with
There.
that one.
Okay. Well, listen, it only sounds crazy if if it's something you can't relate to, and since I can relate to that, it doesn't sound crazy at all. So there you go. But that's a good one. That's definitely a good one. I wish I had a resource for you to kind of focus on that. But besides medication or something.
No, well, yeah. So I won't do the medication stuff, but I'll tell you what, like, because I've read through a lot of books, and I've read books like Cal Newport's Deep Work, and I've read Essentialism, and I've read, I just finished reading the Michael Hyatt book, Free to Focus, and that was the one, probably the first one, that's really resonated with me a lot, to be able to start to really sit down, focus, and do that for a longer period of time. So I'm just starting that journey. So probably in about 6 months, I'll be able to come back and say, hey, listen, I found what works for me to help to improve this particular skill.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sounds good. We'll have to follow up on that.
All right.
Fourth and final question, Billy, what does success mean to you?
When I see my kids learning things, I'll just share this story with you. And this is probably the best way to describe it. Like yesterday, we spent time. One of the things I mentioned to you before, like I didn't talk about money in my home when I grew up, just because we didn't have it, so we didn't talk about it. And one of the things that I'm really conscious of is being able to figure out the way to talk to certain concepts with my kids. And so we actually purchased Cashflow for Kids, which is one of the games that Robert Kiyosaki had. And so we're playing that now, and I don't want to force it too much on the boys, but we sat around as a family yesterday and played, and we've played before, and so now the boys are actually getting some of the concepts in their mind, and it was really, really cool. Like success is when I start thinking about what is it that actually my children are learning thanks to the time and the quality time that we're working on them. And I don't know if I'll ever see what that success is at the end, because a lot of it will depend on how my children grow up, right? But yesterday, my little brother we were talking, and I said, hey guys, how do you know when you're out of the rat race? And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, okay, but put it this way. How do you win the game? And they both said, well, it's when your passive income is greater than your expenses. And my heart melted.
Wow.
I mean, it was just like, I was just so excited. And I know that that's just part of the journey, Yona. Like that's not, like that was a successful milestone, because by playing a game, and me and my wife and the boys, like they took that concept away, and they started understanding what the little green circles were, that that's passive income. And they know that if they buy certain things, then if it doesn't give one of those green dots, then they don't want to do that, because it's just they're using their money in the wrong way. And so for me, that was one of the things that I was just really excited about, hearing them talk to my brother, their uncle, yesterday about that. So that was like a successful moment. And when I can see more and hear more of that, especially things that I didn't really talk about growing up, it's like a success moment.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's very fulfilling, because it just shows you that, first of all, kids pick up on a lot, right? But when it resonates with them and they can say it in their own words, that they get it.
Yeah.
And so that's awesome, because things like that, like you said, a lot of people, if you didn't grow up talking about it and discussing it, then it may be difficult to, bridge that gap for your own children. And, I find that struggle for myself as well, but it's something that needs to be done, and definitely something that you will see the fruit come out of that when the time comes. So Billy, it's been awesome. Great conversation.
Thanks,
it's so sad that it's so short, but we got to keep it for our listeners to the set time, at least for now. But where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'd like to give people just a couple different flavors, as you mentioned before, and I really appreciate you, and I appreciate that you invested your time with me on the Going Long podcast. And when really say to anyone who wants to know more about learning how to invest long distance, and no matter where you live, definitely check us out on the Going Long podcast. I would say anyone who wanted to also know a little bit more about the energy thing we were talking about earlier, you can send an email to energy@billykeels.com. Definitely check me out on LinkedIn, and do me a favor. And this is something that I learned from you, Yona, and I appreciate this about you. When you reach out on LinkedIn, definitely make sure that you tell me that you listen to Yona and I here on Wise Advice, please. That helps me a lot, and it also helps Yona and I know that you're listening and you're reaching out because of today's conversation. Anyone that wants to know some of the mistakes you can miss, that you can not do when you're doing long distance investing, go to billykeels.com/7 mistakes. And if anyone wants to speak to me, you can just go to bit.ly/speak with Billy. And Yona, thank you so very much for the opportunity to have another great conversation with you and your entire audience.
Pleasure, Billy. It really has been my pleasure. And I did take away a lot from this conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time. And, until next time, to all of our listeners, remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.